I've spent the last 3 days at the Second World Summit for Social Development, where I met a lot of inspirational people who have committed their lives to helping others, lifting the most marginalized and vulnerable people in society out of poverty, violence, and unemployment, and contributing to meaningful and sustainable human development. People who have altruism in their DNA, the desire to give back, and an unwavering commitment to inclusion, justice, and social equity. It's generally been an empowering and motivating experience. And while the exposure to this global community of like-minded development practitioners is certainly heartening, this warm feeling of reassurance and solidarity unfortunately stands in stark contrast to the actual state of the world. While there are clearly many individuals, groups, organizations, and even governments putting their money where their mouths are and committing time, effort, and resources to addressing the developmental challenges of the world, our collective targets still seem distant and remain a steep uphill challenge. It feels like we're living in a paradox. The problems of the world seem to be getting bigger and bigger, but the resources needed to address them seem to be decreasing at an exponential rate. In parallel, while we've never been more connected with technology, the internet, and AI, communities and countries seem more divided than ever. At an individual level, many of us spend countless hours engaging with social media, scrolling through our feeds, each existing in our own tailor-made echo chambers, keeping us divided and isolated in our own cognitive paradigms. Everyone online speaking, posting, debating, and arguing, but how many of us are actually listening? The American psychologist Carl Rogers said, "We think we listen, but very rarely do we listen with real understanding." And through it all, I can't help asking myself how we could effectively address this pervasive state of disconnection. Why don't we have more empathy towards others who have different viewpoints to us? Because in my view, empathy, which has long been considered a soft skill, may actually be one of the most powerful tools we have for meaningful, sustainable human development. Yet we don't even teach it in school. Because in a social media-driven world that thrives on being offended and feeling outraged, empathy is genuinely disruptive, progressive, and, dare I say, rebellious. It's hardly surprising that more conservative and right-wing opinions about empathy have, in recent times, tried to paint it as a weakness and a tool of manipulation to push liberal agendas. When everyone's shouting in an echo chamber, the loudest voices tend to rise to the top, not necessarily the wisest. Algorithms reward outrage because that's what gets the views. And the result is a culture where being right matters more than being kind. A culture that turns disagreement into division. On the other hand, empathy interrupts that cycle. It's the quiet act of choosing to understand when it's easier to attack. It's what builds bridges in an age that keeps building walls. It slows things down and asks, what might this person be feeling or going through? What might I be missing? And of course, it's important to differentiate between empathy and sympathy, which both deal with our emotional responses, mostly to people who may be struggling through a tough time, be in a dark place, or who may be upset, angry, overwhelmed, or physically unwell. Sympathy involves feeling sorry or pity for people. It comes from an external perspective or a top-down, unequal third-person position. It's saying, I feel sorry for you. Conversely, empathy refers to the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person by walking in their shoes. It involves recognizing their perspective as their truth and not judging them for it. Telling someone you know how they feel and that they're not alone, that can be a harder and more vulnerable choice, because to connect with the way someone's feeling, you have to connect with something in yourself that knows that feeling. That doesn't mean when someone pours their heart out to you and shares their pain, you then start telling them about your own problems and how hard your life is. That's not empathy, and that doesn't help. It also doesn't help to try and point out silver linings, like at least your problem isn't worse or as bad as someone else's. But even if you can't relate to what a person is feeling as an individual, because realistically that's almost impossible, an empathetic response can even just be, I don't even know what to say right now, but I'm glad you told me. Because as the American academic Brené Brown puts it, the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection. But when it comes to personal or political differences, it's also important to point out that empathy doesn't mean we have to agree. It means we care enough to understand. As the American poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote, if we could read the secret history of our enemies, we should find sorrow and suffering enough to disarm all hostility. But again, to be clear, empathy isn't pity, it's not sympathy, and definitely not a weakness. Empathy is the courage to feel with another person. It's the willingness to step outside our perspective into someone else's experience without judgment. Empathy requires understanding another person's point of view and what they're feeling. But what do you do with that understanding? They say knowledge is power, but I'd say it's only power if it leads to meaningful action. And that's where we come to the idea of radical empathy, a more active and deliberate process that involves challenging your own biases and assumptions to deeply understand another person's perspective, and then taking action based on that understanding. Radical empathy requires a deeper commitment to perspective taking and a willingness to move beyond personal viewpoints to create change and build trust. It moves empathy from emotion to transformation. Because empathy isn't just personal, it is political. It's not only about one-to-one relationships, but how we see entire communities. In her book, Radical Empathy, Dr. Terry Gibbons, an American political scientist, challenges us to move beyond just feeling compassion to actually changing systems. In the book, she describes her experiences as a Black woman navigating academia, showing how empathy isn't just an emotional response, it's a social responsibility. Radical empathy means acknowledging history, privilege, and power dynamics. It's about seeing the invisible structures that create inequality and choosing to confront them. She stresses that empathy without action is performative. To dismantle racism or any other systemic oppression, we can't just feel bad. We have to do more than that. We have to call it out, and we have to act to change things for the better. And that's the essence of radical empathy, to turn awareness into accountability. In her words, empathy means acknowledging our shared humanity, but radical empathy means doing the hard work to ensure everyone's humanity is respected. Because in practice, empathy is how relationships deepen. It's what turns small talk into real talk. It represents the most human of desires to be seen, heard, and acknowledged. Because when someone listens without judgment, it validates, it recognizes, and it heals. In workplaces, empathetic leaders don't just manage, they inspire. In families, empathy diffuses tension and fosters safety. And in communities, empathy can dissolve the us versus them narrative. Connection happens when you recognize the humanity in others. Of course, it's easier to dismiss people as wrong than to explore why they think the way they do. But the moment you understand someone's fear or story, anger often dissolves. When you see someone from another community, country, or religion and accept that you're more similar than you are different, that you both want to live in peace and dignity and want the best for your kids, that's when you break down barriers and the walls of division so trust can take root. Empathy takes courage because it means stepping into the unknown, and that can seem disconcerting. It asks us to hold that discomfort and trepidation without running away. And importantly, empathy doesn't erase accountability, it strengthens it. When we understand, we can respond with purpose, not impulse. My favorite quote about empathy is by the Austrian psychotherapist Alfred Adler, who said, "Empathy is seeing with the eyes of another, listening with the ears of another, and feeling with the heart of another." But critically, empathy is a skill that you can build and strengthen through daily practice. Being an active listener is a good start. Sounds easy, but it takes effort and intention. And even if we think we're good listeners, we can always improve our active listening skills, like actually putting our phones down, giving our full attention to people, and asking relevant, empathetic, and open questions. I've spoken before how mindful meditation has helped me with the pause between reacting with emotion and responding without judgment. Again, it takes intentional practice, especially when you disagree with someone, but sometimes taking a breath can be all you need for that all-important pause. In terms of understanding different people, why not challenge yourself to broaden your worldview and learn about other people's cultures? Reading books, watching films, and interacting with people from different countries and religions are great ways to open your mind and accelerate your personal growth. And this one can be hard for people, but when you witness an injustice or an act of discrimination that doesn't sit right with you, call it out, stand up for people in need, act with courage and empathy, and don't just sit there in silence. It can be particularly difficult if the perpetrator is someone you know or even love. But when you act in alignment with your values and stay true to yourself, you definitely won't live with the regret of not having done anything. Ultimately, empathy has the power to transform individual relationships, families, communities, societies, and even the world. It reminds us that every opinion has a backstory of a lived human experience. Empathy doesn't weaken us, it strengthens our humanity. And right now, that might be the most radical act of all. In our modern world that seems to reward outrage, empathy represents the capacity to not just to change others, but to change ourselves, to create deeper connections, promote social equity, and build trust by moving beyond passive understanding to real, meaningful, and active engagement with each other. And on that note, I'll stop there for today. I'd like to thank you for watching this episode. Feel free to share it with anyone it might resonate with. And if you enjoyed it, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you again soon.